Good morning, everyone. We are starting our day in a graveyard. Let's hope it gets a little more cheerful from here. It's the Sometimes vlog, yeah. Gotta remove our hats here for respect for the dead, and there is plenty of dead around us here. This is part of the historic Mount Olivet Cemetery here, still in Hannibal, Missouri. Today is the day I absolutely must leave town. As a matter of fact, it's just afternoon here, and the only reason I'm still in Hannibal at all is because the last video is still uploading on my laptop, and I don't want to jinx the connection from my cell phone that is allowing it to do that. So while we're waiting for the vlog to upload, thought I might as well come to Mount Olivet Cemetery to pay my respects to a family we've heard a lot about over the last couple of days. It's the Clemens family. Here's the grave of Mark Twain's older brother, Orion Clemens, and his wife, Molly, over here. Here is the grave of Mark Twain's younger brother, Henry, who was killed in a steamboat explosion. This is the grave of his mother, Jane Lambton Clemens. We saw her dressed down at the Mark Twain boyhood home 2 days ago. And here's the grave of his father, John Marshall Clemens, who passed away after getting pneumonia. All right, here is another grave right here. The grave of Injun Joe. In the book Tom Sawyer, Injun Joe is like the most evil dude in the world. He's like a half Indian, half white man, and he's really into like drinking and murdering and robbing and murdering mostly. In real life, Mark Twain took his name from this guy, Joe Douglas, who was an Indian guy who was found out in the middle of nowhere, a boy who was like partially scalped, and he had to wear a really ugly horsehair wig apparently, so he was not the most handsome man in the world. Mark Twain borrowed his name for the villain in the book Tom Sawyer, which old Joe Douglas here was not a huge fan of. And there's an old legend around town that when Mark Twain came back here, this guy was like, why don't you use my name? And Mark Twain told him, because you're the ugliest guy I've ever seen. So he super didn't like being associated with Injun Joe, and as it says here, he always lived an honorable life. So not only is this headstone kind of rude because it says freaking Injun Joe on top, which was definitely not his last wish, but why does he look so much like the guy on the penny? Anyway, if Sam Clemens was the real-life Tom Sawyer, Injun Joe did have his revenge because he outlived him by 13 years. All right, let's see if this thing is done. Yes! The vlog is finished. I have to daisy chain it to my phone, and you do not get pretty good cell phone reception in Hannibal, although it's a lot better than the last time I visited. So I have to come way out to Lover's Leap or the cemetery out here outside of town to get signal, then use this as a hotspot for my laptop and upload a 4 gigabyte 1080p vlog from yesterday all about Hannibal history and other cemeteries and murders and a neighborhood built on top of human graves. So if you didn't, you might want to go back and see that if you haven't already. Also, here's this thing that I got yesterday. My Tiki Man here. I'm not 100% sure if I can get him all the way home by car. I may ship him somehow if I can, but you can see he's pretty stoked on coming on the adventure. And then I got Owlie the owl and stuffed Mark Twain here. They're all on board for fun and stuff. The whole reason I'm on this road trip is because I'm taking my friend Tyler, who moved to California and then moved back to his home in Georgia. He left this hat here, his Mexican large hat, his sombrero. And everybody knows you can't live a good life in Georgia without a sombrero, so I'm taking it back to him. And I've spent several days in Hannibal, Missouri because I'm a huge Mark Twain fan and I wanted to rest from all those crazy Route 66 things we did. And now it's time to bring Tyler his hat back so that I can go back to California eventually. Oh, right before we go though, remember that haunted mirror yesterday and the place where the guy got axe murdered? Here's the grave of the guy, Amos J. Stillwell. Murdered. A lot of history and a lot of stories from places like this. Lots of those lumber barons we talked about are buried here in this graveyard. Many of these prominent old school Hannibal families have left town, obviously, but a lot of them are still here. And some of them are still burying their relatives up here. So I guess I'm just weird because I'm one of those people who would rather come out to a cemetery like this and learn some old stories than watch the Kardashians. Although even I will stop and take a look at Drake's grave, huh? Who doesn't want to see that? I don't want you guys to think I'm like super creepy and weird or anything. But sometimes I like to think, or at least I like to imagine, that these people know that we're here hanging around doing vlogs. They probably don't understand what a YouTube video is, but I'd like to think that they're stoked that there's people coming around talking about them, wondering who they were, at least remembering that they existed once. So, I mean, I'd like to hope someday that I got a thing somewhere like this and that somebody remembers I existed. All right, now we really gotta go. So goodbye, Mark Twain's boyhood home. Goodbye, Becky's house and this place. Goodbye, Cotton. Goodbye, Huckleberry Finn house that we never really talked about. And goodbye, Hannibal. I love you with all of my heart. And of course, a final farewell to Mark Twain himself. Wow! Wow! All I can say is wow! Look at this thing! This thing is so great. The ugliest Mark Twain statue in the world. It was built for a former Mark Twain tourist attraction that existed here, Clemens Landing. Nowadays, there's nothing left of Clemens Landing except for a Injun Joe campground over here, but I guess it used to have like a fake Hannibal and a fake riverboat and all this stuff, but we're only like, I don't know, 15 minutes from the real Hannibal, so I don't know why you wouldn't just go to the... Anyway, look at how weird this thing is. Look how flat he is from the side. I've known some skinny, flat people, but none so flat as this guy. One of the earliest vlogs I ever did was from right here in front of the ugly Mark Twain statue with my buddy Tyler. And as a matter of fact, I was just thinking, I started these sometimes vlogs. I started this channel really to document a trip that I took to Hannibal a couple years ago with my buddy Tyler. Tyler very justly pointed out back then that this Mark Twain appears to be smoking a carrot. He's very famous for being the ugliest statue of almost anything anywhere. I mean, he's got a face even Mark Twain's own mother couldn't love, and he's all flat looking and weird. 30 feet tall though, so he's got the whole NBA career locked up. And he's also just got really tiny hands. They're just like little baby hands. He's got a whole like Donald Trump thing going on there. Anyway, before we leave Hannibal, we had to stop and say farewell to Mark Twain. Farewell, almighty Twain. Thank you for these great adventures. Wow, weird. Stuff like this is my favorite stuff of all the stuff. Also, look at this. It's like I'm holding him. What a fun pic right there. What a fun one. They should have a statue like this. Of all kinds of, like one in each town ever, everywhere, should have to have like a homemade statue of somebody. Anyway, there you go. Weirdo, ugly Mark Twain. We did it. Just had to pull over here to the tiny town of Winfield, Missouri. Ooh, look at that old Jeep. This is the kind of town that my grandmother used to say, you spit on it and make a rainstorm. It's a very, very small place. This is very much heartland America, and this right here is all that's left of the old Main Street. Most of the few standing buildings here are all closed and empty. But hey, if you need a place to open up your business store, Winfield might be for you. The reason that I'm in Winfield, speaking of my grandmother, is that my grandparents used to have, well, my great-grandparents used to rent a farmhouse out here on a little tiny private lake, which they referred to as the clubhouse. So they would come up from St. Louis and spend time out here in the country. Delving into a little of my own history now. This is the only thing that's open here. I might as well take a look, huh? Well, maybe not. Maybe not right now. Having lunch next door, please call whatever. I'll be right over to let you in. To be honest with you, after the Tiki Man incident yesterday, I don't know that I need to be messing around with any more antiques, but this is definitely a very cool looking, very heartland America type of place. And here comes the train. Look at that. The Burlington Northern. Whoa! Kidding you? That took like 10 minutes. Well, the antique lady never came back, and I don't want to interrupt anybody's lunch, especially since I might not buy anything anyways. Winfield, Missouri. Now, as beautiful as northern Missouri is and the countryside is, I gotta make my way out of the countryside and into the big city just on the north side of St. Louis, because there's something that I really want to see. Okay, this is a little bit weird, but I've pulled over to the side of the road here in northern St. Louis, just outside of Hyde Park, to look at this. Way back in the 1960s, my great-grandfather used to live in this house here off Salisbury Street in St. Louis. He lived in one part and rented out the other part. This is a total trip. Now, for any of you who know anything about St. Louis, you'll know that a lot has changed since those olden times. This place is not exactly the most crime-free city in the world, but it's got a lot of beautiful buildings and a lot of beautiful history. I wish I could spend longer here checking this place out. The family who lives here is slightly weirded out about me snooping around, taking video and pictures of the house, but they seem okay with it. Like, yeah, for a few minutes, you're fine. This is actually the house where my great-grandfather passed away. It's a cool story. He was born in Sicily in the 1890s, came over on Ellis Island in the early 1900s, all the way out to St. Louis here with his family, worked as a child laborer in a spaghetti factory, and at the end of his life, lived in this big, huge house. Look, they have their own owlie up there. That's awesome. When he was very, very young, he married my great-grandmother, a woman named Rose, who died at a very, very, very young age and left him with 3 kids. So he remarried a couple more times actually, but at the very end of his life, when he was dying in this house, he was calling out for his beautiful Rose. That was so awesome. Super nice of those people to let me look at the house, especially after I explained to them that my great-grandfather died in there. I don't think they really liked that part of the story. Actually, thinking about it now, I don't like that part of the story. I mean, if my great-grandfather died, does that mean that I could die? No. Honestly, in a lot of ways, I'm just happy that that house still exists, because huge, vast chunks of St. Louis are just total, they look like a war zone. They're just bombed out looking buildings that have just been abandoned. This is one of those cities that used to have a very, very massive population, but after World War II and the interstates and all the suburbs were invented, a lot of people were just like, why am I putting up with living in this city again? And left. And basically St. Louis went from this massive, massive city with this big population to this tiny population, and all these brick buildings just kind of went to seed. It's funny in a way because the interstate kind of helped to kill St. Louis, and St. Louis is actually on Route 66. So as much as the interstate is a great and wonderful thing and honestly makes doing what I'm doing possible, there does sort of seem to be an unintentional theme going on here. I am now looking for something that I'm pretty sure is long gone. Oh yeah, I'm too late. Right here on this pile of rubble, dang it. When my grandpa, who was living in California just before, when World War II broke out, he moved back here to St. Louis near his family and enlisted in the US Navy from St. Louis. And he lived in an apartment building right here, 1502 Branch Street. A guy who used to be my uncle, which is weird, sent me some pictures of this place not too long ago, so it was standing until pretty recently. But it's now completely demolished. It's crazy, there's like nobody in this neighborhood, there's nothing here, but this was once like the middle of a thriving, crazy, packed city. Well, the building might be gone, but I can still grab some souvenirs. Oh yeah, that's just what you want all over your blanket, some nice brick dust. Well, that was my grandpa's basement once. Now it's a pile of trash, lost to history. Maybe not that interesting of a piece of history to other people, but right here, for me, I'm touching a piece of my history. So for me, this is pretty cool. Someday there might be nothing here but grass and a few weird people like me to tell the story. You can see why I was just grateful that my great-grandpa's house was even standing over there. Wild. All right, we got other stuff to see. In recent years, there's been a much greater push to sort of re-inhabit all these old neighborhoods in St. Louis. So there are actually a lot of places in town that are like experiencing a rebirth and a renewal. But there's still a lot of stuff here that to someone from Southern California where space is at a premium, stuff like that looks crazy. Okay. Now I'm really tripping out. This was my grandfather's elementary school. Patrick Henry School. My grandpa was born in 1915. Yes, 1915. He was an older gentleman by the time my mother was born. And I've seen pictures of him and his sisters at this school, like in the 1920s. This whole part of St. Louis is a giant piece of forgotten history. There's an area of St. Louis that's a very famous Italian neighborhood called The Hill. It's a very nice place, all these cute little houses, and there's a lot of Italian-American culture and heritage that's very strong there. But down here, all around this school, this entire area was the original Little Italy. It's now completely gone, completely vanished. Right over there is the Edward Jones Dome. That's the big stadium in St. Louis. And you can see all up here in this whole area, everything was torn down. It's all replaced by modern apartments. One of the only pieces left down here is this old Catholic church. This right here is the Shrine of St. Joseph, and it's a big deal in terms of St. Louis history, but especially for my family, the Italian side, they all went to this church. This was the main massive church of St. Louis's original Little Italy. Weddings, funerals, big feast day, this whole area around here that has all these clean apartments, this was all packed with like really tiny old school falling apart brick and timber buildings. I'm not talking about the late 1800s, early 1900s ones that we were seeing on the way here. I'm talking about stuff that looked like old school Hannibal stuff. Like if you've ever seen a movie about Italian immigrants and they're all packed into nasty tiny little areas, that is what this whole part of St. Louis was like. And all those old buildings were demolished for what became the Edward Jones Dome back there, but also just to get rid of urban decay, because a lot of them were abandoned, they were really nasty, the housing conditions were not up to standard, believe me. So you can see here on this sign, it was founded by Austrian Jesuits and used to be home to a German immigrant community. That was back in 1844. So this was an immigrant, close, packed in, poor immigrant community in 1844 when they started building this place. After that, lots of Irish immigrants, and then of course came the Italians. This place still has a lot of historical significance for Italians in the St. Louis area, Italian Americans, but it's also very significant to just any Catholics because it's also the site of a Vatican authenticated miracle. I'm honestly not sure what the miracle is exactly, but the Shrine of St. Joseph is pretty famous and pretty well revered in the area. Maybe the miracle is just that this church is still here at all, actually. That was my grandpa's school right there in the 20s, and that was the local church. I was just thinking about this. It's crazy, like, there's no way that my grandpa, back in the 1920s, could have known that, I don't know, almost 100 years later, his grandson would be here snooping around looking at his old school. Yeah, excuse me, ducks are spitting in my eyes again. I don't know why, it's just a lot more emotional than I thought it would be. You can believe whatever you want, but I'd like to think that he knows. Sorry, I'm just sort of the family historian, so I'm the one that talked to all the old ladies in the family and all the old relatives, and I know all the stories here about, you know, my family and what they went through and what they fought for in this area. When I say fought for, I mean, they came from Sicily at the turn of the last century. At the end of my family's time in Sicily, before they came to America, they were literally had the children out working for the family so they wouldn't starve, following around horses and donkeys and stuff, and picking up their poop to use as like fuel for fireplaces and things like that, or to sell to other people to use as fuel for fireplaces. When my family came to America, this right here is where they live. Look, just in the shadow of the arch and the big stadium here. This is all overflow parking for the thing and just pretty much completely abandoned by the city right now. But this intersection, this was the corner of 6th and Biddle Streets, and this is where my family first lived when they came to America. My great-great-grandfather and his whole pack of sons, they all worked for Hamilton Brown Shoe Company down here as like full-on sweatshop workers. As a matter of fact, my great-grandfather, before that even, was a child laborer in a spaghetti factory. This was a super ancient part of St. Louis. It's right down there is the Mississippi River, and then of course downtown is all right over there. I'm not sure which corner of 6th and Biddle, but while my aunt, the great aunt, the last one of my grandpa's sisters that was left alive, while she was dying, she was in her 90s and she was dying of lung cancer. While she was dying, I spent a lot of time with her, and she would talk about how her grandparents lived here on the corner of 6th and Biddle in a building that, you know, like it just wasn't fit for human habitation, really. When my family members were living here, these buildings didn't have any electricity, no plumbing, no nothing. You're talking about people who started life at the very bottom of the scale. Didn't speak the language, didn't have any job skills here, no property, no money, nothing. Once they got here, they learned to speak English, and they worked and they worked and they worked. Like I said, we're talking literally worked in sweatshops here. Like the old old-timey ones where you'd get chained up to a sewing machine. I don't think anyone in my family literally got chained, but it was that era for sure. Well, my great-grandfather Giuseppe, or Joseph as he was called by this point, he worked super hard at Buster Brown Shoes, Hamilton Brown Shoe Company, getting paid piecework until he was able to open a restaurant on the north side of the city. But then eventually, within just a few years, after a horrible, nasty divorce in which a lady took everything from him, I feel you, bro, he was able to get a loan from a big dairy here, Peevely Dairy, and reopen another new restaurant right here. This right here is O'Fallon Street, or used to be O'Fallon Street, and this is where it runs into Broadway, which is now pretty much just a frontage road for I-44, I think, the big interstate cutting right through downtown St. Louis. When they built this interstate here, they had to demolish a lot of this stuff, also for the Edward Jones Dome. I can't pronounce that, like I was saying. But right here, where 6th Street and O'Fallon and Broadway connect, right here was my grandpa's restaurant. The restaurant was right here. It was called the Emporium Cafe. My great-grandfather, an immigrant who didn't speak English, who came to this country as a little kid with no money, opened a little tiny cafe and restaurant in a building right here, and slowly but surely took over all of the rest of the building because he was so successful. One part of it was a bar. He hand-built the bar all himself. My aunts helped him run it. They lived in the back of the restaurant. They lived in part of the building here. This place right here in St. Louis was the Emporium Cafe. Can you imagine that, coming here with nothing? You don't even speak the language, nothing, no money. And then eventually you're a business owner. You own a huge business right here. Even back then, this was pretty downtown area. So my aunts living here used to have this huge Great Dane named Gypsy that lived with them. If you look at the old picture of the restaurant, you can see this like wooden shelf thing outside. That's where they used to put watermelons and produce, because that's another line of work that my family was into. And they used to sell produce on the side of the road here with that dog Gypsy chained up to the fire hydrant or to the light pole that was out here. This fire hydrant's a little too new to be there when my great-grandpa owned the Emporium Cafe. We're talking about during World War II. It was basically the end of the Great Depression, during World War II, and into the 50s that he owned the restaurant right here. As a matter of fact, in the 50s, he hired a lady that lived across the river in Granite City, Illinois, to work in the kitchen. Her daughter met his son, who had been in California during World War II. They moved back out to California, where they had my mom, and then I came later. So that happened here. My grandparents met each other because of a restaurant that was right here. I would not be alive if it were not for this place. That's trippy. I'm having a freaking Back to the Future moment right now. This right here, this place, this is where my family put down their first roots in America. Now here's the tie-in, if you've been paying attention to Route 66 and all the stuff I've been talking about today, which, by the way, I think 44, isn't that Route 66 right there? Weird. No, here's the tie-in. The interstate here and the expansion, the moving of Broadway, is why they had to tear down my grandfather's restaurant. So the city paid him money for his restaurant, his building that he had here, and with that money, he bought that other house that I showed you earlier and died somewhat peacefully in it. I mean, for me, this is crazy. I'm standing where my aunts and my grandpa and my great-grandpa, they used to live right here. I got a lot of cousins, too. I wish they were as interested in this stuff as I am. I'm hoping maybe this will get them interested, you know? Now, the other half of my family, we have been in North America, the United States, since 1640, before it even was the United States. My family was here in New Amsterdam, which is now New York. And another branch of my mom's family has been here since Jamestown, which, as you may or may not know, is even earlier than that. So I do have some deeper roots in the United States as well. But personally, like a lot of you, I'm sure, I'm very proud of my immigrant Dago roots here in St. Louis. So, I mean, these remnants are all that I can have. There's really not that many photographs. There's really no one left alive that knows any of this stuff. As a matter of fact, other than one aunt that I can think of, I am probably the only person alive that knows this. Well, and now you guys. My eyes keep getting sweaty with respect because I just think about not only my grandpa, who I love and I miss dearly, but I just think about my family coming here. Only a block away is where they started their American story, really. And then just up here, my grandfather, you know, great-grandfather turned himself into a somewhat successful businessman, and my grandparents met each other here and all this, and I just think, like, you know, who's gonna remember are all these people? Who is going to tell their story? I mean, there might be old brick paving like this somewhere that your family walked on that is almost ready to be bulldozed and covered over by parking lots and forgotten. But it's not about the buildings, it's about the people, you know? They were people like me, like you. Yeah, maybe they're gone. Maybe they have no idea that we're standing here talking about them, but I don't know. They deserve to be remembered. Not just my family, all these people. They deserve to be remembered. There's no sign here about the original Little Italy. Anyway, I'm sorry if this one's a little weird and maybe a little bit boring to some people. I know you guys are used to seeing me ride Pirates of the Caribbean or something, and now I'm standing in a desolate, empty parking lot. I thought about just coming through here without saying anything or without showing it to anybody, you know, maybe just taking a few pictures with my iPhone and moving along. But I wanted to share this with those of you who cared a little bit, you know, so. All right, I guess it's time to be getting back on that interstate and heading down south a little bit. I haven't been able to locate too many pictures of this area as it was before it was all torn apart. So just as a side note, if any of you are like St. Louis historians and have a secret drawer of pictures of old Little Italy or something like that, you get a hold of me, please. Stupid stadium, stupid progress, ruining history and stuff. Dang it. I know. We need progress. It's the future. We need medicine and technology and the internet and YouTube, so it's fine. I just wish there was a plaque or something, or maybe some sort of informational website. Now, obviously, as a Mississippi River steamboat pilot, Mark Twain also spent a lot of time in the city of St. Louis. His sister Pamela and her husband William Moffett lived in the city between 5th and 6th Street on Pine Street or Avenue or whatever it is, apparently. Well, that neighborhood is totally gone too now. It's a huge parking garage. Although this horse has been here the whole time.
Yeah, I remember Mark. He owes me $5.
When the light turns green, you guys want to race? Or, no?
You win, brother.
Oh, okay. I don't know. It's a Nissan Versa. I probably wouldn't win. I'd just like to say for the record that St. Louis as a city is pretty awesome. I played a lot of shows here when I was in my band, everywhere from Creepy Crawl down here to this place called the High Point, and up in a different part of the city to an old abandoned slaughterhouse that some people had converted into, I'm not even kidding, converted into a venue. We played in the basement of an abandoned, supposedly haunted slaughterhouse. The car traffic I can handle, but these horses are everywhere.
Get the heck out of here, you crazy horse driver! Go back to Jersey!
All right, there's just one more thing we gotta see while we're in St. Louis, and I think you guys can probably guess where I'm going with this. We're going to the Wax Museum! I'm just kidding. We're not really going to the Wax Museum. Right now it's closed, but I really want to come back to it though, because I really want a selfie with Shrek. I want a Shrek flee. We're going to the arch. Jeez, look at the size of that thing, huh? This is one of those times where cameras do not do it justice. There's nothing next to it to give it any perspective. That thing is 630 feet tall, which means you could stick 3 Epcot balls or 3 Walt Disney World Magic Kingdom castles in there, or like seriously like 7 Disneyland castles in there. Oh my gosh, there's some sort of construction. I cannot get to the arch. All right. Here it is, the majestic Gateway Arch. And I don't know why, but it's like totally closed. No room at the inn. Oh dang, there's like a whole museum thing under the arch. It talks about Lewis and Clark and how St. Louis was the gateway to the west, because St. Louis is built basically where the Missouri River meets the Mississippi River. It talks all about Thomas Jefferson and the Louisiana Purchase and all that stuff. Dang, I am legitimately bummed out. I mean, I'm here too late probably to have gone inside of the arch anyways. Oh yes, I have been inside of that thing before. You can go inside all the way up there. You go up in these little like circular elevators. They're like little like, I don't know, like Bond villain pods that go up in the arch up to the top, and you get out and you can like crawl on your knees and look out these little slit windows up there, and the whole thing kind of sways in the breeze slightly. It is terrifying. The view from up top is pretty amazing though. Here, look at. See, it's kind of like this, only a little higher, but pretty much. Whoa! Oh, I'm just as scared actually being up there. Okay. Well, this arch is meant to represent the gateway to the west for all the settlers on the East Coast, but for our purposes, coming from the West Coast, going to the east, this is like our gateway to the east. So, symbolically, We've done it. We've done our duty. The Mississippi River's down there. I wish I could show it to you, but I mean, we saw it this morning in Hannibal. It's a bummer. I thought I could show you a more epic view of the arch, but things don't always go according to plan, I guess. I don't think this thing's going anywhere, so it's not like we can't come back. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's made out of metal, some sort of metal. I guess that's it for now. We'll just have to come back to experience more. How could I forget? Fun pick, ready? Am I doing it right? Am I doing it right? Ready, I'm gonna jump, ready? Pull, fun pick, and I get holding onto the sides. I can hold on. Pull, fun pick. What a fun one. Awesome. Well, that's super beautiful. And now it's time for us to leave the west, head east. I'm gonna book it as fast as I can to my buddy Tyler's house in Georgia, because of course I gotta turn around and come all the way back across most of these states, so we'll see him. Thank you guys for coming with me on the journey. Subscribe if you haven't already. YouTube.com/LiveFastIPour is my other channel. Then there's this channel, LiveFastIPour on Instagram, Justin Scott on Twitter and Patreon, and I got LiveFastIPour at Spreadshirt.com shirts. A bunch of stuff in the description. Thanks for hanging out with me. See you later.
This is a great town. You know any other towns where you can buy pink horseshoes? I didn't think so.
All done. Oh my gosh!